So, yes, big thank you to all of you who have decided to join us in person. It really is a privilege to be here with you all and to actually explore the practice tonight, because we're actually missing one of our key teachers. This was to be our 80 years of cumulative experience, but you'll notice our beloved Alan isn't here tonight, which is unfortunate. He had is otherwise committed and couldn't join us, so he sends regrets. And I know he really wanted to be here with all of us and all of you online. So we'll look forward to hearing from Alan in a future session. But oh, thank you, Leslie. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. But really, before we even do continue and get started, I really do want to acknowledge that we live and gather on the traditional lands of multiple Indigenous people. And in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations. This territory is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And for those of you who have joined us in the past, it's good to see your smiling faces here again. And those of you at home, and for those of you that are new, welcome and thank you for joining us. A reminder about who we are. The WTM is actually Wellness Through Mindfulness and was founded by Dr. Blustein, Phil Blustein, here to my right, which maybe for those of you on Zoom, look at me and say hello. And Phil actually, and I have to say this, so some of you may know that Dr. Blustein actually has written a book, and it is for sale in the back. You might have noticed it beside the teas. It's a wonderful book on mindfulness and exploring breath. And if you'd like to talk to him more about it, I know he would love to share some of his wisdom around that. So please feel free to explore the book. And if for any of you who are online, this is also something that you can read more about at thebreathproject.org. You'll find information on there on Dr. Blustein's book. But as I continue, a reminder that this is a volunteer organization. All of us are volunteers and all of the speakers are volunteers. So thank you for those who've actually donated here at the hall, but you can also donate online. We'll put a link in the chat. Anything that you feel you would like to contribute is really helpful for us. It helps pay for our website and the support that we hire to actually keep all of our electronic communications, our posters, everything that we send out to actually keep you all in the loop to let you know what we're doing. So anything you want to support is welcome. And if it's not at this time, that's good too. So thank you for being here. If you would like to see other talks or other resources, please visit WTM, and it's linked to thebreathproject.org, and you'll find lots of previous speakers and their talks and their handouts. There's just so many good resources there. I know some of you were mentioning that you were here last time for the healing sound bath. That is posted on there, so if you'd like to revisit that and experience it again, please pop on, or any of our other really valued speakers that have come. A reminder, again, we are the first and third Thursday, so when you register, you can select that you're going to attend as Zoom or in person. We'll send you a reminder email as well to let you know that the event's coming up. And a reminder for those that are here to bring slippers and a teacup. So I see some of you sitting with your feet up. It can be nice to have just those warm slippers to keep your toes warm. All right, so coming up in the next 2 months, actually our next talk is April 20th, and Pam Hauk, who's here again. Hi Pam, nice to see you. She is going to be presenting mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and this combines cognitive behavior techniques with mindfulness strategies to help individuals better understand and manage their thoughts and emotions. So I will be moderating and hosting you that night, Pam. I really look forward to it. I think it's going to be a wonderful evening, so I hope you can join us. And following that, May 4th, we can hear from Dr. Donsky. And in this session, he will explore aspects of our inner life where paradoxes and contradictions live side by side. And if you know Alan, this will be like a wonderful talk. So in attending the relationship of these opposites, we may see a unity where peace, beauty, and joy fill what once was an empty space. And so a reminder that tonight and all of our sessions that we give are really with that intention to provide education and learning, and isn't really meant to be a forum for discussing or dealing with specific personal issues. So wellness or mindfulness and the team here really are for educational purposes. And tonight's content especially is meant to really serve that intention. But we welcome the discussion and how we can enrich the practice. So please feel free to enter your questions online or offer those as you feel so inspired. But I'm happy to be here with Dr. Phil Blustein, Dr. Leslie Ellestad, and we are here to share some of our insights from our combined years of experience. How many do we think that is now?
Let's say 60.
60. Okay, a good healthy 60.
A good 20 each.
And this actually came from a conversation that I was having with you, Phil, one night. And I said, we were talking about coming back in person and how great it would be to actually make it more interactive, where we could just share some key concepts, some wisdom that we've had in our practice, and maybe generate some conversation in what you're noticing in your practice, and maybe what you've been wondering about, or maybe you wanted to speak to a teacher and just actually get some support. So we thought each of us would take about 10, 12 minutes and share some key insights about really the essence and maybe what's inspired us in our practice that we felt called to speak to tonight. And then of course we welcome your comments, your thoughts, and the conversation that we can generate to follow. So anything or any questions before we get started? I think I've pretty much covered everything. For those of you online, please feel free to put any questions in the chat. So we really want to make this an interactive evening. Good. Right. So I am as yet a COVID virgin, so I have still got my mask on because I'm like, I made it this far. And I do have an elderly mother who is high risk, but I am going to take my mask off to speak. So know that I'm being mindful as I do that.
Should be on speaker.
Okay.
I changed it to speaker just that Leslie should be in the center of the screen, right?
Yeah, it's okay. They will be at home. Go ahead, Leslie.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start with a short meditation.
Yeah.
So let's start with some bells. So feeling into the silence. Sensing your body on your chair. And making a decision to be here. Be here now, in your body. Feeling upright in the spine. Hands either in your lap or on your thighs. And then checking in with the body. We want to encourage our mindfulness by having alertness as well as ease. So with an upright spine, checking in, inviting the face to relax. The belly. The hands. And then it's helpful to also notice our feet. Feet on the floor. Connecting with our breathing. Notice the changing nature of the breath. An in-breath leading to an out-breath. And following the changing sensations of breathing. The breath is constant and inconstant. As long as we're alive, we're breathing, but the sensations are always changing. Knowing that we can rely on our breathing. When we get distracted, we come back to our breath. And it supports our meditation to invite calm into the breathing. And releasing on the out breath is a support for calm. And as the breathing continues, check in, are there any pleasant experiences? Any sense of ease, happiness, openness, settledness? And allow the mind to rest in anything that feels pleasant. Keeping the breath as an anchor, but maybe a little bit more attention on the pleasant experiences and less on the breathing. And we can include all our experience. And if there is anything strong that comes up, allow the breathing to accompany your attention and include this strong experience. It may be a body sensation, an emotion, some thinking, or tension in the mind. And just use the breath as a support as you include what might be termed an unpleasant or difficult experience. If the strong experience diminishes, you can increase your attention on the breathing. Again, make the breathing the center. And now pop the question, who or what is experiencing your experience? Pop the question, no logical answers, just experiential answers. Who or what is experiencing your experience? Every once in a while, checking in with the body. Are you still upright, relaxed? Make any small adjustments that help you feel both alert and relaxed. And then as we come toward the end of this short meditation, bring your attention to the heart area. And just sense that there is this natural capacity we all have to care. You may want to put your hand on your heart if it helps you to connect. And you may prefer a different word than care. The capacity for goodwill, capacity for loving kindness, friendliness, generosity. All of these qualities are part of our human nature. We have that within us. And recognize that we have other people here in the room with us who also have this capacity. And first, spending a moment to acknowledge within yourself that you are here this evening as part of a community, people who are also interested in mindfulness. Just feeling how you value this shared interest with others. And as your heart perhaps feels more open with these prompts, then sharing the warmth in your heart with those you're close to, perhaps the people you may see within the next few days, or even this evening when you go home. Just think of one or two people. And then share this warmth with them. And then allow that feeling to expand and be as inclusive as you wish to be. Making wishes for all of those you wish that you want to include. And those wishes are, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe and protected. And may you be peaceful and at ease. So in my guided meditation, I basically told you what insights I've had over my 25 years of meditating. The insights are that experience is inconstant, it's constantly changing, and that there's a combination of human experience of difficulty, that's called dukkha in the Buddhist tradition, and there's also this freedom and openness and all the loving feelings that human beings are capable of. And ultimately, according to my teachers, we can eventually become free of the tendency to cling and to suffer. We will always have painful experiences, but whether we suffer with them can change over time. And I have noticed that myself. So I'm not just talking about what I've heard, have also experienced it. So those three experiences are my basic insights. And the reason that I started to meditate is a common reason, which is I did notice that my mind seemed to be struggling. I might term it anxiety, was why I started to meditate. And I went to meditation out of yoga. So yoga to a meditation class in a yoga studio and then onward. And my journey was to read a lot of books, and to find a tradition which I thought was going to serve my needs. And so I've studied in both the Tibetan tradition, it's called Dzogchen. I did that for 10 years, and then I have started practicing since 2010 in what's called the Insight meditation tradition or Theravadan tradition. And so my journey was to initially practice locally and then to expand to go away for retreats. So I've attended 2 years of retreats. I've spent 2 years of my life in the last 25 years on retreat. And now that I'm retired and my kids are growing up, I have a lot of time to practice. So I practice probably 2 or 3 hours a day. I'm very passionate about it. My journey has included the crossover between meditation as a spiritual practice and meditation as a healing process. Many of you have probably been introduced to the psychological traditions that have the North American psychological traditions that have incorporated mindfulness as part of the way they're informed. And in particular, I've had some trauma therapy, which is very much like meditation, except that it incorporates more about what your body wants to do as far as movement. So I've experienced that. And I guess what I would say that the best thing about the journey that I've been on is that I feel like I know myself better and I make wiser choices. So I would recommend it. I don't want to sell it, but I do recommend it to anyone who's interested. So you can take it as being a half an hour a day practice that you do some of the time, or you could take it as something that you expand on and start attending longer periods of practice. And it's just up to you how much it interests you and how much effort you want to put into it. There's many other wonderful things to do in life. So you do not need to be someone who ends up going on month-long retreats like I do. But at the same time, it is endlessly fascinating to find out how the mind works and how we're put together and how we can gradually free ourselves. The other thing I wanted to say, so that you know that there are many options. I'm talking about Buddhism because that's what I have investigated. There are other forms of meditation. There's secular practices, and there are yogic traditions, which Christine she's a yoga teacher, so she may know more about that than me. And there are 3 major groups of Buddhist traditions. So what I've already spoken about, and then Zen, and then Vajrayana traditions. So if at some point you're investigating and you have questions about any of that, all of us have some experience with each of those. Well, one of us has some experience with each of those traditions. So I've practiced in Tibetan and Theravadan, and some, I think Alan's done a fair amount of Zen practice. So we are also a resource for you to say, I'm interested in this. Can you tell me where to go or where to look for these practices? So what we plan to do this evening is leave the questions for after everybody's spoken.
Mhm.
And so I think, was Christine next? Yeah.
All right, thank you, Leslie.
Yeah.
That's a lot of experience we have right here. This is good, this is good. I've only been on one silent retreat as part of my 2-year mindfulness meditation teacher training. It was for a week. So it was a wonderful experience. So there's the invitation to work up to a month. I will say that you could start with a day, which we've actually hosted in the past. We haven't done that for a while, but that might be something that we may do if the interest is here, just to invite you all here to, actually, this is where we had it. It was a Saturday. It was lovely.
Yeah.
So, there's like the gradual dipping of the toe, but I'm gonna take a little bit of a different exploration. It was so wonderful. Leslie gave us an experience. I'm gonna talk a little bit about my experience and then summarize some tools for you. So what Leslie was indicating, more of like that secular path, I'm actually trained in the tools of mindfulness. So I'm not a practicing Buddhist, but I do believe in the tools and the benefits and how it helps the mind, because just like Leslie, it's been very beneficial for me in helping me to heal that monkey mind that has really gotten away with things in the past. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we get going, I wanted to share a story that I came across. It was several years ago, and the Dalai Lama was in Washington, D.C. at a Mind and Life conference, and he had just released his book on happiness. And one of the reporters that was interviewing him asked him what has been the happiest moment in his life. So this is the Dalai Lama, and so he paused, and you know how he gets that little bright twinkle in his eye, and he kind of gets this really big smile. And he said, I think now. Can you imagine being that reporter? It's so wonderful. And so I really want to hear from all of you. How are you right now? Can you share with me online in the chat, or just a couple words to name how you are right now? Anyone?
I'm happy to be here.
Oh. Let's hear. What is the truth of this moment for you?
Content.
Pardon?
Content.
Content.
Curious.
Curious. Oh, we have someone else online who's curious, interested, and comfortable. Sitting at home. Yay. Peaceful. Let's get anyone else. So that very practice of just taking a moment can be so profound to just note what's here right now in this moment. What do I know that is the truth of me right now in this moment? And that's an invitation that we can bring at any time. And it draws us in, it draws us inside to check in and say, like, how am I? How is my breath? How is my body? Where is my mind? How is my attitude? How is my emotional state? Like just what Leslie was guiding us through, even just to take that 1 minute of note, or even not even a minute, that 1 second of noting, to just pause. It's just such a gift. And it's a simple, simple practice, but it really is that invitation for us to, work that aspect of us that releases the judgment, that maybe releases the criticism or the want to change things, but to actually be here with some kindness, with some curiosity, with that invitation for ourselves to see what is true and can we accept it? Can we accept this moment for what it is? Or is there an invitation for actually a shift in perspective to actually take some action or to help our mind state or, look at our attitude? So, it's just in these moments that we really remember. And I think that that's one of the most powerful parts of the practice is the mindfulness. And through our practice, we do start to remember. I feel like I'm turning my switch on here with my hand. It's that remembering. And, we likely all have those big moments in life that we remember. Maybe it was like the birth of a child or a significant celebration, those key moments, or maybe it was a walk in the mountains, like when you're in nature and you're just so surrounded in the moment, or a swim in the ocean, or a deep belly laugh. Like we can recall those so easily. Their significance may come easy. All of our senses were there, we were present. But so many times throughout the day, we're lost in the thoughts and in, the action that maybe's happening, that it really is a great time for us to just check in and see. And if you've, been at some of our other events online or here with us at the hall, some of you may be familiar with my story and why I came to meditation. And a big part of that was actually because I was completely disconnected to my body. I was in a really busy, stressful career. I was living from the shoulders up. And similar to Leslie, my invitation came through yoga in Shavasana and connecting with the body, connecting with the breath again. And those were really like the first prize winners of my attention, because it felt like a great place for me to put my mind, that my attention could easily rest in the body. I felt comfortable checking in with my breath. I maybe didn't always like what I was seeing or where it was, like it was perhaps shallow or tight, but there's messages in that. And the more that I started coming into my body and understanding what my body was communicating, the more in touch and more mindful I was actually coming throughout the day, because I was continually going back into my body. What's happening? What is the messages? What am I missing? Because we know the mind and the body is so linked, and it's for the body is continually sending messages for us to like pay attention. It's like, hey, over here, we're feeling a little contracted. We're feeling nervous. We're feeling tense. The stomach, there's so many messages in the body all day that we like miss and that we overlook. And so as I got more into body scan and like breath work, it really was my way in. And then I got more familiar with open awareness and my thoughts and my attitudes and my mindsets and actually what that meant and how I could expand my practice. And, I will never forget, I don't know if I've told this story, but I will never forget, I was at work. So I was practicing these in the evening, and I was at work. I worked at a busy advertising agency, and I'd gone for lunch with a colleague, and I had been driving, and we got back to the parking lot, and we popped out of the car, and she looked at me and she's like, "Gosh, for someone so zen, you sure do drive fast." And that may or may not be true today. As I was driving here, I was like, oh, maybe that is still true. But it was like the first time ever that I had somebody reflect to me that I was like, oh, something's changing in me. Like my energy is shifting, how I'm communicating, how I'm showing up. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting, because what I believed about myself for so long, that this intensity that I had, this mental energy, was actually really who I believed I was. That I believed that if all of that turned down, that maybe I wouldn't quite actually be enough. That if I turn that down, then, there might be some judgment around, oh, maybe she doesn't care enough. She's not as diligent or dedicated or all those things. And I thought, so here I was turning it down and yet still present, and actually probably more productive, My relationships at work were better. My patience was better. My focus was better. How I communicated with my team got stronger. So it was, and I won't say this was like, oh, yep. This is like a gradual process and a deepening of that awareness. And so when I think about the context of where it started and that present moment awareness, some of the practices that I really still love to do, and ones that I would suggest to you, that if maybe you're feeling anxious or distracted, or there's been prolonged periods of stress, like a great way is actually to bring that noting practice that I just mentioned, but you could also deepen it through an acronym called STOP, which is like S being actually just stop in the moment, pause, and we take a breath. It's like, how is my breath? Where is my breath? And then we start to observe, okay, where's the breath in the body? What sensations are here? What kind of tension am I feeling? How is my attitude? How are my thoughts? You're just taking this non-judgmental inventory of actually what's here. And within that, of course, we've paused, and then actually we can proceed with wise action, which is exactly what Leslie said, the whole practice to actually make that conscious choice in how I maybe want to respond in this moment, whether we're having a conversation, whether there's a bigger decision to make. Do I need some time to consider? Like, am I really listening? So that STOP acronym to come into that present moment awareness is really like a really great practice. And just also, as Leslie had us do, is to come into that witness part of ourselves. Like, who or what is witnessing this moment? What am I noticing to be true? Can I find that distance from those automatic responses, those unconscious responses, to become conscious and say, oh, wait, maybe I could pause and I could tell this person, yeah, can I just get back to you? Or, wait a minute before we send that email or make that phone call. To really honor ourselves by listening. And the body scan is also like a really great way for that present awareness, where we can actually use it to invite relaxation, which I think can be a great part of the practice, but also to have a body scan where we close our eyes and we just notice what's here. Where do we start? What are we feeling? Moving through the whole body and just paying attention in a really deep, concentrated awareness to the present moment. So that present awareness. And the second way that I really love to work is actually with the breath. So using different types of breathing techniques. And I know Phil loves to talk about the breath, but to me, the breath is just that beautiful reminder that we are here and alive. Like really, we think about that, we are breathing and alive in this moment, that gift of breath. And we can have those feelings, or maybe I just do sometimes, where I can get in the practice, oh yeah, here with the breath. And it feels so repetitive, and I've done this so many times. But the exploration that really can occur with the breath, it's like the length of your inhale versus the length of your exhale. Where are your pauses in between? What is the texture of your breath? What is the rhythm of your breath? The speed, like all that the breath has to show in just that one cycle of an inhale and an exhale. Where is it in my body? How do I open to receive it? Am I tight? Is it easier to inhale versus exhale? So much to discover and so much to be grateful for within that. So we can just open up to the breath, but we can also work with controlling the breath, which is a really great way for the body to calm. So some great breathing techniques that I love to do is the box breath. Not sure if any of you are familiar with that, where you look to balance the inhale and the exhale to the same length and invite a pause in between. So inhale, count of 3, pause 3, exhale 3, pause 3. We just keep going back and forth into this balanced nature of the breath. Another beautiful way is actually counting down in the breath. So you could start with 20. You could inhale fully, fill the lungs. As you exhale, count 20. Inhale fully, exhale 19. And it's actually a really wonderful practice to notice when you might get distracted and start telling yourself stories. And it's like, oh, where was I? 12. Okay, back to 20. And try again and just come back and back. So great way to calm the body, but of course there's also that focused attention that you're also experiencing while you do that. And I'll just share my one and final breath practice that I really love is the doubling of the exhalation. So we inhale to a count of 3, extend the exhalation then to a count of 6. So really working on just coming into that sympathetic and the parasympathetic just to calm the body. And those longer exhales are just a beautiful way to do that. The one thing I would ask you to consider is when you choose your breath practices, really check in with how you are. Like, what do you really need? Like for me personally, because I know I'm a sensitive person, I actually find the box breath can actually make me feel, if I'm feeling a little bit anxious, for me can actually make me feel a little bit more triggered. Like where if I'm holding my breath, actually it doesn't help me to calm down. So just notice, am I breathing too long? Christine said, inhale to 3 and exhale 6, and now I feel worse. So it's that feeling of, oh, maybe 2 is good, and 4, or maybe 1 and 2. So really be honest with what the body is showing you, what it has to tell you, and find that for you and what works for you, because it really is your practice. This is really your time to listen in and say, what is right for me? What is the right thing to choose in this moment? Because what might be right now, at the end of the day, actually might not be the right practice for first thing in the day. So there's an exploration here. And I would just say, I will add one. We've talked a little bit about intention and how important, attention is. I would also just like to add to what Leslie said in understanding intention, what it's like to foster that sense of loving kindness, gratitude in our practice. And, we recognize that what we practice, we get better at, right? So the more we practice those efforts and those contributions of loving kindness, the more that we can bring that into our life. But it is a practice. But there's research now that says actually those emotional traits actually can turn into behaviors the more that we do these practices. We know the truth of that. It's funny because I was thinking, Leslie, when you were talking about loving kindness and it's Easter weekend and we're all going to be with our family, and like Ram Dass said, you think you're enlightened, go spend the weekend with your family. It's like, yeah, bring that loving kindness, won't you? Sorry. Oh, that always makes me giggle. I just love that he said that. So as I close my part of the evening tonight, I just really invite you all to choose those right practices that really help you, that really what is going to deepen, what's going to enliven your practice, and that can you bring the energy of the beginner's mind again? What it's like to actually come back, for instance, to the breath with that sense of curiosity, of wonder, of like an experience of what was long considered predictable can be new again, and how it can support you, like really support you, that this is for your wellness, for your well-being. And to me, that's the whole intention of these practices. So I'm going to share a quick poem and then I'm going to give it to Dr. Phil here. But John O'Donoghue is really a beautiful Irish poet, and I don't know if any of you know him, but if you would ever like to listen to him, I can tell you the best podcast ever is Krista Tippett, and she does On Being, and she interviewed John O'Donoghue. It's like the most fascinating listen. So if you would like to hear more from him, he really is beautiful in his words. So with the intention of that beginner's mind, and the exploration of the practice. This is blessings for the senses. So if you'd like to close your eyes and listen into the beauty of his words, or whatever feels right for you. So for the senses. May the touch of your skin register the beauty of the otherness that surrounds you. May your listening be attuned to the deeper silence where sound is honed to bring distance home. May the fragrance of a breathing meadow refresh your heart and remind you you are a child of the earth. And when you partake of food and drink, may your taste quicken to the gift and sweetness that flows from the earth. May your inner eye see through the surfaces and glean the real presence of everything that meets you. May your soul beautify the desire of your eyes, that you might glimpse the infinity that hides in the simple sights that seem worn to your usual eyes. May your soul beautify the desire of your eyes, that you might glimpse the infinity that hides in the simple sights that seem worn to your usual eyes. Turn you over.
One last person. Hopefully you can stay with it. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming this evening, whether you're in person or on Zoom. It's great to be back at Shaganappi and be in community. So I want to start by saying that this has been a wonderful exercise for me. This has prompted me to be able to look at when I started my practice and why, where am I now, and maybe where I'll be in the future. But let's be clear, what I'm going to share with you is my insight. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's right for me. And the single most important thing you can take away from this evening is, don't believe any of us. Why? Because you can see that we all have different doorways of entering into understanding what this is about. And really what you need to do is take what we are offering, take it home, experiment, work with it. And what works for you is all that really matters. So I've had a contemplative practice for not 80, but 27 years. And I originally started my practice, why? Because I think the same reason most of us are here. I was stressed out. I was anxious. And I'll tell you that there is no doubt in my mind, this has been an absolutely helpful practice in terms of dealing with my stress and anxiety. That I am less triggered, less intensely triggered, and I have a much greater capacity for resilience to come back. But what was even more interesting was a gift I got from this practice that I never realized. I never wanted it when I started out. And it was a gift of empathy and compassion that has spontaneously developed for myself and others. And I truly believe that when you do this practice, the practice does you. So what I like to share with you tonight is predominantly my insights on mindfulness. Let's be clear, there's no one definition of mindfulness. Historic Theravada Buddhism said this was a discerning process, very important. Discerning was what was present skillful, and how do I act skillfully? Totally changed in 1979. John Kabat-Zinn created something called MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which was a strategy for dealing with chronic pain. It had nothing to do with your mind. It was how to deal with chronic pain. Bear in mind that he defined mindfulness as awareness of the present moment on purpose non-judgmentally. Doesn't sound very discerning, does it? Totally opposite perspective. He was a Korean Zen Buddhist. He had a very strong Mahayana Zen tradition. When he was asked what non-judgmental meant, you know what his answer was historically? Non-judgmental meant non-duality. What in the world is non-duality? No separation of subject and object, resting in pure awareness of the original mind prior to the thinking mind. What in the world is that? I really would like to look at mindfulness initially from the perspective of, is this really about being non-judgmental? I would often hear, thoughts are thoughts. They have no meaning. Thoughts are like clouds in the sky. Just let them pass. Well, I don't know about you, but I have thunderstorms. I have tsunamis, and I just couldn't let them go. It made it sound so easy. You hear this all the time. Just let it go. Let it be. Forget it. So, I lose my keys. What happens? What do you think? My mind instantly says, how could you lose your keys? You are so stupid. You are so incompetent. You are so terrible. You are so horrible. Am I the only person in the world that has these thoughts? Probably not. So what is significant about this? This was the crux, I think, of understanding how we let go. In every moment, our minds are referencing this present experience against the belief system of who I believe I am. Am I acting in a way that my sense of self should act? Or is it incongruent with my belief system? I lose my keys, I'm terrible. This is bad becomes I am bad. So what happens if it was just keys are lost, need to find them, if not, make another set? Would there be suffering? No. Why is there suffering? There's suffering because we introduce this concept of self, I. This is the critical understanding of mindfulness. Critical. It is the fact that we create a sense of self that we identify with, and we take ownership for all the bad things we believe the sense of self is. So, mindfulness is not about not judging. It's about non-self-referential judgment. It is about non-attachment to self. Very key. So how do we go about letting go of self? That's the issue. The Buddha was amazing. 2,600 years ago, he had the insight that said, anything we create as I, me, or mine leads to suffering. Unbelievable. How did he have that insight that the sense of self was the problem? The Buddhists didn't really care why we suffered. They really were caring about understanding the nature of reality. And they talked about what was called 3 marks of existence. Everything is impermanent. So if everything is impermanent, if you cling to it, you're going to suffer. And what is it that clings? The sense of self. But the sense of self is just impermanent. Wonderful insight. But you know what? It never resonated with me. I never could really use it. You know what? This chocolate is impermanent. I love eating the chocolate. I had it to start with, but now it's gone. It makes me more upset to know it's impermanent. So, what am I trying to say here? What was crucial for me in understanding my sense of self and letting it go was the integration of Western psychological strategies and Eastern philosophy. So let me explain this to you. When I was growing up, my mother ruled the house. It was her way or the highway. I learned to please and appease. I learned to be invisible. I learned to have no demands. I learned to be the good boy. And I developed a very simple strategy. Just be perfect. It wasn't hard, was it? When I lose my keys, my mind says, Phil, you have not acted according to your belief system. You're not supposed to screw up, Phil. You're not supposed to make mistakes. Because if you make mistakes, then there is this fear of not feeling safe, of not feeling lovable, and not feeling worthy. And every single one of us here has a belief system about who they are that has originated right back when you were this little child. We were defenseless. We need to make our parents happy. If something went wrong, we were responsible for it. We created this belief about who we are. And we created a self in order to compensate for our deficiencies moment to moment. We are 72-year-old adults living with 4-year-old minds that still partly control what I do and what I don't do. But it was this insight into understanding how I create my reality, my sense of self, that was instrumental in allowing me to see, this is what's going on. And I could begin to deconstruct myself and begin to not attach to myself. And at times, not even create my sense of self, that I could just be present. It's important to understand what I'm saying here is this is not about figuring out and solving, this is not about solving my problem of self and my relationship with my mother. This is about understanding why I have created my sense of self and understanding why in every moment when that little voice is talking to you, it's your inner child calling to be heard. And that is the crux, that is the segue to freedom and knowing really that the voice that's talking to you really isn't critical or judgmental. It's skillful. The intentionality of your inner critic is just trying to make you feel safe, loved, and worthy. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. We have to develop a different relationship with that voice that talks to us. And so why is that important? Well, we've heard about embodiment. Conventionally, when we are faced with something we don't like, what do? Hell, I'm running away. I don't like that. I'm going to deny it. I'm going to avoid it. And when we try and embody our experience, which is really a very important part of mindfulness, have you ever noticed that as you get close to that hot spot, you just don't want to go there? There's something about it that's fearful. And you know why that is? When we were very young, even before we had language, when we were threatened psychologically or physically, our bodies were primed for fight, flight, or freeze. It was a survival mechanism. The problem is that we never completely metabolized and released that stored historic trauma. And so today, when I lose the keys and my stomach starts to flutter, and if I start to go and try and connect with that, in the beginning, I don't want to go there because I am triggering the memory of my historic trauma, the trauma of my mother letting me know in perhaps an implicit way that I didn't feel loved. And so that's why we can't approach our bodies so easily. But when we understand that it's the sense of self that's there, that little child, there is the capacity to begin to approach it. Because mindfulness has this wonderful capacity to reparent and create secure attachment for us. Why? Because if we can rest with what we are experiencing mentally, emotionally, physically, we are giving our wounded child the message, you know what? I'm here for you. You're safe, you're loved, you're worthy. And that allows the child to begin to let go of its attachment. And so there's something very, very magical about our body's capacity to metabolize and release our stored somatic held energy. That if we can stay with our bodies long enough, our bodies will naturally know what to do. And then there's something really magical and mysterious that then happens. That when we have the capacity to not attach and ultimately not identify with the sense of self, we enter into a space of presence, a space of mindful awareness. This is not a space we create. It's already there. We just need to allow it to be revealed. What is this space, this wonderful place of mindful awareness? It's a space of intuitive compassion. There is this compassion that arises for yourself and other spontaneously. You don't have to construct it. It's a space of intuitive wisdom that knows the nature of reality and knows how you should act skillfully with ethics, morality, and non-harming. It's a space that knows innate joy without it being dependent on having the right car or the right house. It's the capacity to be present without having to defend the ego. And in that situation, there's no separation of self and other, which opens one's up to interconnectedness. And it is a space of joy that honors this wonderful, unique gift and talent that each one of us has, whether it is artistic, dramatic, athletic, intellectual. It allows us to recognize it, honor it, cultivate it, and allow it to be expressed. So, I may have explained a path to you that may seem very strange and foreign. And I totally don't know it yet. And you want to know something? I'll never know it. But it's so exciting. It's so exciting to be able to be present from a place of mindful awareness, awareness that is innately compassionate and wise, rather than having to always come from a place of feelings of inadequacy and deficiencies. So I'll close with one last story that really, for me, said, wow, I think I've had a taste of true mindfulness. My mother died 3 years ago. She was 100 when she died. It was after the funeral, we were coming back, and all of a sudden I was just overcome by this grief and sadness. But there was a knowing, there was just this knowing that what I needed to do is to turn towards the sadness. And in that moment, there was no sense of, I am sad. And there was no sense of, I am noticing the sadness. It really was just being with sadness, true sense of unity. And you know, actually within the midst of all that sadness and grief, there was a sense of relief and peace. And in that moment, I remember I said to myself, I hope I can die like this. I hope I have the capacity to be present with what is and not fight it, and be open to it and allow it to just move through me. And so it is a wonderful path, whichever way you find it. But I would strongly urge practice daily. Be open to the unexpected, be open to the unknown, and you will be given gifts that you never expected to receive. So with that, we will close what we wanted to talk about, and we would invite from Zoom chat questions, and from you anything. This is a great opportunity to ask 60 years of experience. Anything you want to know about your practice or our difficulties in our practice. So please don't be scared, because of what you ask, I can assure you, the person beside you is saying, wow, thank goodness they asked that.
We'll let you know that Phil has given each of us a key to this place. So I'm going to be thinking, if I ever lose that key.
So while we're waiting, and please, we really encourage you to ask questions. I'm going to ask our two people up here, because this is the hardest problem that we all face. Why practice? God, it's so bloody boring. I sit there and what do I do? I mean, God, I honestly have done a lot of vertical sleeping in the guise of meditation. So what can we offer to everybody here that's going to encourage them to follow the path? Christine?
Okay, well. I think recently I've come to the understanding that I have choice in my practice. That the practice that I may choose for myself actually can be in response to what I most need. So I think that there's, there can be this belief that we have to proceed a certain way every day, consistency with the practice, and yet I feel that over time that there's like a softness and an invitation in the practice that can be there for yourself, versus maybe a sense of rigidity. Like I feel like I felt that early on in my practice, that I had to do it a certain way or it wasn't right. And I really think that understanding that there's multiple ways to practice in answer to what we need the most, when we need it the most, is actually a really great way to look at the practice. Like we can look at our day and be like, oh, I didn't practice this morning at 6 a.m. and I should have been in there. And I've opened that up to be like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna do it at 10 when I have 20 minutes in between meetings. And I do it then, as opposed to, oh, I missed that, then I missed it today. Like I really have found a lot of compassion for myself in the practice. So I would say that when I find that invitation to spaciousness to the practice, I find I'm much more successful. I just offer that to you as a way to consider what might be right for you day by
Leslie?
It's a little bit hard for me to answer this question because I've always loved practicing. So I would say look for what you love about it and keep doing that. And as long as you love it, keep doing that. And then when you don't anymore and you're getting bored, then investigate another aspect of the practice. Certainly finding support for the practice, community, teachers, materials online, etc. We have so much now. I started with a cassette tape, and that's what we had, and books. Remember those days? It wasn't quite an 8-track, but it was a cassette tape. And then another thing that really helped me was to plan my next thing that I was going to do. So for you, it might be, I'm going to commit to going to Wellness Through Mindfulness every 2 weeks, or whatever it is. Having a commitment where you're getting support for practicing has been very important. For me, it's now planning my next retreat. So about halfway through a retreat, I'm thinking, when do I get to go on another one? That's called the greedy mind. So always thinking, how can I support my interest in this practice? And when Phil says about being bored, usually for me, that's a signal I need to find something to be curious about. So walking meditation, you may have heard of. How many have done walking meditation? A lot of people hate walking meditation. I don't know if you do, but the way through anything where you're kind of, oh, I don't want to do that, is how can I increase my curiosity about this experience? So whether it's sitting on your cushion or doing walking meditation, it's what angle can I look at this from that I start to feel interest again? Because if you're not interested, you're not going to get much out of that. You can be interested in boredom. So there's nothing that you can't be interested in, including boredom. So those are the things that I would say. And then take it from me, it's what we call onward leading, that the practice, if you do it, gradually leads you forward. It gets its own momentum. As Phil said, the practice does you. Eventually, actually, I forgot to say this in my talk, is the last stage of practice is when you actually just have to get out of the way of the practice doing you. So you're getting out of the way means disciplining yourself to limit your distractedness, but also not making as much effort. So that's ahead of you on the practice, is eventually your job is to relax. So that sounds pretty good to me. That's where the practice leads, is to this capacity to just sit back and let the practice feed you. It's kind of like you're surrounded by compassion, and you just sit in the middle of it and let it operate. So the other thing there I'm saying that comes to me is to look for mentors who inspire you, people ahead of you on the path. So, and I've changed my mentor over, basically study with someone and then find they've taught you what they can, and then find the next person that you're going to learn from. So loyalty is not necessary. It's more like loyalty to your own process. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Mm-hmm. So just going to answer this and then get to that. We have one online question first, and then we'll go to you. I'll be very brief. The reason why you should do the practice is because of us three. You've just heard us share what benefits we have from the practice. And like Leslie says, in the beginning, it's a slog. Come on, sitting there and listening to your mind talk and criticize and compare. And they say we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and all 60,000 appear during your meditation. For me, I am not a faith-based individual at all. But there was something that was quite faith-driven within me in this practice. There was this sort of intuitive knowing that this was the right thing to do. And yeah, maybe at times I was more consistent than others, but I persisted. And I'll share one little technique that can be very helpful to do a meditation practice, bearing in mind that sitting in formal practice also is different than also throughout the day being aware of what you are experiencing. And so what I did is I said to myself, this is a priority. I need to do this. I want to meditate for 30 minutes. Okay. What time do I need to get up in the morning in order to be able to get to work at 9, drive to work, have breakfast, have a shower, meditate. And that became the way I organized my day. I organized it backwards from the setting of meditating as a priority. And meditating in the morning for me, and maybe for a lot of people, is a lot easier than at nighttime. When you're up in the morning, your mind is quiet. It hasn't had that opportunity of engaging all day long. I'm going to go to a question, and then we'll go to your question. And this is the question. Ramana Maharshi advocates asking, who am I? Which is part of what you said. Is that also the essence of your message, Phil? So we will briefly answer this question, because we want to get to more. So one of the really confusing things in Buddhism was not self. Now, they're not talking about no self. They're talking about not self. What in the world does that mean? I'm not self? What do you mean? Who else is talking to me in my mind? Aliens? What the reality is that we create a sense of self moment to moment. Self is very important. We can't function in this world. It serves a very utilitarian function. What do we do? Hey, you, I mean, you one, you two. So we need to identify ourselves. We need to function in the world. But what we're really trying to say is that, yes, there is this self that we make up based on our conditioned history, our wounding. But that's a temporary, ephemeral construct. That we are more than this sense of self. I have a self, but I am not myself. And that's what I was trying to talk about, that ultimately we can move beyond that place of conditionality of self into presence, into openness, into awareness, into allowing. Do you want to comment on that, Leslie?
I would go back to inconstancy as being the most, and I'm using the word inconstancy equivalent pretty much to impermanence, that there's nothing that's unchanging, that there's a constant changing process. So I can't be something solid because everything is constantly changing. And we know this when we look in the mirror, that we don't look as young as we used to. So that this sense of me as a now in my 60s is much different than when I was a 6-year-old. So definitely I can't hang on to anything about my body or my intelligence, that's going to dissolve too, probably, or at least my memory. Everything, nothing about this body and this internal thinking process is going to last. So then what else is there? There's awareness, which is basically what it comes down to. Awareness is the space within which everything arises. And awareness is also where compassion, loving kindness, we can connect with it. So that would be my answer, but you need to find your own answer.
For yourself on the screen.
Oh, that's good. So it is 8:28. We have a few more minutes. Was there someone here that had a question?
So my question actually builds on what you commented on, and maybe you answered part of it. So, we talk about separating yourself from the sense of self. So for somebody who identifies with the sense of self today, it may be a journey to get there. Can you talk about how to break it into little pieces to build on that and then get there eventually? What might those small steps be where you're not getting there right away, but you're doing something little to get there?
No, please. She was asking you. You go ahead.
So you're absolutely right. This isn't in some situations it's described as sort of this epiphany. But personally, for me, it has been this process where sometimes I do touch into a state of awareness without the sense of self. So it's a gradual process. And what I find that's, I'll just share what it is and then I'll get to what I think is the way to do it. You know, in the beginning, I was self. I was myself. Who else would I be? Who else would be talking to you except me? You see, I forgot what me was going to say.
How did you loosen up your sense of self?
Just that easy.
And that's it. But what? Thank you, self. But what I've discovered for myself, and it's just my path as along this. So there was this identification with self. I. Little child truly responding in the moment. And slowly, I began to notice that that sense of self could arise, and I could be with it. And it wasn't just, didn't take me away right away. And then what evolved was everybody has a characteristic trope about themselves, right? Mine is, I'm terrible. That's mine. That's my mother's words. Those are my words. And it would be words only. There was no emotion. There was nothing charged behind it. It would be like, I'm terrible. Okay, I've heard that before. Nothing new. And then it would be, I have a friend who's really reactive. And how do you know you don't have a sense of self? You don't know what's not there. You know what's there. But when I could compare myself with my friend, and they would be going off and reacting, or other people would react, and I would say, gee, I didn't notice that. Then I began to notice that I wasn't being as reactive. So for me, first of all, just to describe, that was the path. It didn't just happen. And it would be, you would touch into it and you would touch out. Hold on to it. At words without meaning, power, and then it would just be no self. And so what are the ways in order to deal with this? Christine beautifully said it. When we get dysregulated, you cannot talk to a dysregulated mind. When you are charged and traumatized, the thalamus that controls the flow of information to your brain shuts down. The capacity to speak shuts down. You cannot talk your way out of significant stress and trauma. You need to stabilize yourself first. Breath and body. Breath, breathe in, breathe out longer than you breathe in, because it's connected with the parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. Number 2, ground yourself in your body. Feet. We feel energy, torso. You don't feel it in your buttocks and your feet. Ground yourself. 3, label. Fear is present. Sadness is present. Absolutely simple and effective technique. Why? When we get upset and agitated, we're just so caught up with the story that you don't know what you know. And what we're trying to create is called meta-awareness, to know what you know. And if you can say, fear is present, the simplest and most effective way to create presence, anchor you in the present, and begin to create some distance. Why? You have to be able to step out of ownership of the fear in order to recognize it. So ground yourself, label. And the last thing is this. Reflective meditation, as I call it. You can't deal with what your mind is doing when it's aggravated in the moment. You're just overwhelmed. Before your meditation, or as a dedicated meditation, relive a moment during the day. Or don't worry, your mind will give you something that will criticize you in the next moment. And I don't have time to go through this process that I have personally created in order to reflect, but it really is quickly, my dear child, imagine it. What are you feeling? May I hold your fear to embody? What do you need? What needs to be done? So it's a lot in a little bit here. But great question, because it isn't just, I'm there. You touch into it, but what happens is we have the capacity to decondition our conditioning and recondition our conditioning. We can change the story and create a new story. Any other questions? Why don't we do this? Are there any other questions? Oh, okay.
Lots of thinking. Lots of thinking.
I'm going to turn this over to Leslie, who's going to close the evening.
Okay, so I feel like we have spoken a lot, so I'm not going to do a big summary, but I think that we've been very happy to share this with you, and I hope that it's been helpful to you. And I mean, I've learned a lot about my friends just being up here. And I want to let Phil know, because I've known him now for 5 years, he's actually not terrible.
It's only internally.
Actually, Phil is very kind and generous. So I hope that I can give him that feedback repeatedly.
Thanks, Mom.
But I am a little bit concerned if I do lose those keys, because his mother might tell me. The other thing that we like to say at the end is that we do appreciate any donations that you can give us, and there's a basket there and also a donate button on the website. So we do have costs, not for the speakers, but for our technical support. And we have Gary, who I have interacted with. He's the guy we pay, and he's very smart and figures problems out very quickly. So he deserves to be paid, especially for the older generation here. Christine knows what she's doing. What else do I need to say? Oh, we need. What was the first thing? May 4th is the next talk. Alan Donsky is talking about, I don't remember.
April 20th.
Oh, April 20th?
April 20th.
Got me on to
Yeah. Pam is here. Pam is talking about mindfulness-based cognitive treatment of depression. Yeah, or just
Mindfulness-based cognitive
therapy. Yes. And then the next thing I would like to say is that you are welcome to help us clean up, because there's a whole cleanup process, including putting chairs away. And if you want to help, then just come up and speak to us at the end here.
And this is going to be a great segue to what we've talked about here tonight, the April 20th NBCT, Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy. And I would highly recommend that all of you come to learn another sort of way to incorporate mindfulness with cognitive therapy. It should be a great tool to have a self, but not be yourself.
or like yourself.
Thanks to all for joining. What a delight it has been to, the credit goes to Christine to pushing us to go back on in person. And it has been an absolute delight. I forget what it's like to be in the presence of people in this sort of format. And we all thank you for coming out and helping us get our footing again. Thank you very much.